With Vane being updated recently and the introduction of survivalism as a skill, I thought I'd set myself a challenge. Create a self-sustainable base. Is it even possible? Would I die of hunger, thirst, sun exposure, burning my hands on hot ingots in a forge, or, of course, to the undead? In this video, I answer the question, can you have a self-sustainable base in Vane? Let's get into it. There are, of course, with any challenge like this, some parameters, rules if you may. They are as follows. I'll have a few days to gather essential resources, tools and equipment. Anything I need to get to the final base location needs to be able to fit on or in a single vehicle, no towing allowed. I am not allowed to leave the immediate area around my base. No going off hunting, no going off looting. Once I'm at the final location, I have to stay there. This will be a choice that will be taken away from me somewhat once you see where I'm basing up for this challenge later on in the video. I also must stay alive, death signals the end of the challenge, and if I can't source food, water, or the ability to cook my food, or the ability to repair my stuff from either what I originally collect or what I have access to in the final base location, the challenge fails as I die. I mean, to put it simply, I need to stay alive. And evidence the case that you can survive by staying in one location and having a self-sustainable base. Enough rule chat, let's get started. First up, settings and character creation. In terms of settings, we're just going for standard, with a couple of exceptions. Power and water are both off immediately, our UC range has been expanded to encompass the whole area of our base. This will make more sense when we get there. Standard settings for this one, as the challenge isn't loot, and it isn't zombies, it's self-sustainability. Now, in terms of character creation, this is where things are very different to other challenges I've done. There's a completely different focus here, so I've gone for construction, mechanical, and electrical, and I'm starting off as a mechanic. Then I had 3 days to prep. These days were spent furiously looting across the map. My strategy was to focus on tools, take pretty much any and every tool I find. I needed to find axes and a shovel, and I had a particular focus on fishing gear too. I knew roughly in my head what I'd need in terms of certain buildables that I'd want to have, and what materials would need to go into creating them. I also knew my base location. I knew where I was heading, so I could plan around that. This base location is incredibly unique, as you'll see later on, and that meant that there'd be things I'd really need to make it work. I was hit early on though by not taking any lockpicking skills. Some containers were out of reach for me straight away, like when I tried to find some axes at Redford Fire Department, but got locked out of the key containers because of my lack of lockpicking skill. Fortunately, it wasn't a complete bust though, as I managed to loot a jigsaw. Helpfully, I also found my first lockpick in one of the lockers too. In Redford, I'd secured some tools, some food, batteries, a baseball bat, and some drinks too. I had a couple of unfortunately timed zombie attacks, whilst I was exerted from running around everywhere, but I saw them off. Just before the sunset on day 1 of prep, I'd found an axe in a shed, then in the dark of night, I continued on, heading to Marty's bait and tackle to clean him out of anything useful. Then my attention turned to vehicles. I was driving a pickup truck, but that wasn't going to do the job, so I swapped it out for a mail truck that would see me through the remainder of the looting spree. And really, from here, I hit anywhere and everywhere that was worth hitting. From Isaac & Son's construction yard in the dead of night, to gas stations, Klein's archery and bait, Frank's hardware store, Countryside fresh food pantry, Brand's Pharmacy, where I was greeted with an alarm, of course, Clinton Correctional Facility for its supply of tools in one single room, Lakeside Gun Shop and Range for, well, we know what we go there for, Big Ned's Fish Shack, where I can confirm canoes do not float yet, Chasey Lake Dairy Farm, Chasey Lake Beach, where I didn't have any time for sunbathing. I went for one specific thing, the solar panel on the roof. I also took advantage and took a nearby toolbox to join a microwave in the truck, which I'd looted earlier on. I then had a moment of what I initially thought was soul-crushing agony, but that turned into a moment of luck. Whilst trying to gather some logs, this happened. Whilst a rage quit was deeply considered for a moment, fortunately the truck hadn't catapulted into the lake, and I could drive away. Then, to round off the second day as the sun set, I headed to the flooded quarry and mined some limestone. This was critical for what I had planned. Then I headed for Anvil Gas to make sure I had a full tank for the journey to our final destination ahead. I reached our final looting point of the night, Sunset Resort, where I found some useful winter clothing, gathered more logs, and almost got killed by a boar, and then nearly got killed by a zombie. First thing in the morning, it would be the final pilgrimage to the place I'd be calling home forever. So that base location you've been waiting for, did I go for mill number 3, with a built-in lift or elevator, its own private mine, and its own pre-installed furnace? No. Did I opt for the lake house, with its perfect location, its own private bridge, fishing pier, and dock? No. I went for this place. Like the lake house, it sat on its own private island. It has its own fishing pier and docks. It has trees and a lovely pre-built log cabin with 2 generators on the island, and it has no neighbours. Now we just need to get there. Unfortunately, there are currently no working boats in Vane. They don't even float yet, as we've seen. So I did need a little assist from the weather gods to make the lake drivable momentarily so that I and my mail truck could get there. Once I arrived and managed to convince the truck to stop and turn in the right direction, the clouds cleared and the lake thawed. This is it. We are trapped. No way back to the mainland. This is home. After arriving, there were a few island inhabitants that needed to be dispatched, but after doing so, I popped back to the truck to get the required materials and the UC was placed. This is DeadZedje Island. This is where we find out if you can have a self-sustainable base in Vane. Now, as you can imagine, the first few days on the island were spent doing what I'm going to call apocalypse admin. This meant taking loads of the loot that took up the £1,200 capacity of the truck, plus the additional £170 of capacity in the toolbox within the truck, and sorting it out. Ish. I tried to add some order: food in the kitchen, pans, trays and kettles in the stove, clothes in a bedside table, batteries and electronics in the trunk at the foot of the bed, weapons stored in cupboards, tools in the toolbox, obviously, and I was trying to make the most of the storage that I had without having to build my own. And for good reason. I was playing this save with base degradation on, something I'll discuss at the end of the video, but that meant that I, for everything I built and placed, needed scraps to maintain it. And storage, well, that's one area where I didn't really want to have to build anything for. Needless to say, I had to give in to this wish within the first day or so, and built a couple of crates next to my workbench. Then I made the decision to try and give myself some electricity. I got the solar panel off the truck and placed it on the roof, hooking it up to the fuse box too. Then I realised that on a cloudy day, there wasn't even enough power to make the fridge work, let alone a microwave, which I'd also brought with me. This presented my first real hurdle to overcome. The problem with a stove is that it needs logs or charcoal. I brought stacks of charcoal and some logs with me, and I was on an island with trees, but the trees don't grow back. At least, we can't plant trees yet, however, that is coming in future. Watch my Vane Monthly for more info. So, if I can't grow trees, but I'm using trees for fuel, is this really self-sustaining? Well, no. However, if I had a microwave powered by solar, then it would be. More on this later. The reality of doing a challenge like this also meant I needed levels, and fast. There were skills that I needed to be able to build some of the later stage buildables. I'd need to have a comfortable base, one which could work all year round. I needed high-level crafting, high-level construction, high-level mechanics, you name it, I had to grind it. This is why my character build was focused on some of these aspects. Now, I'm aware of some cheesier exploits here, but I only really wanted to level up by making stuff I'd really need. Planks, metal brackets, wooden rods, reinforced planks, reinforced brackets. But with each more advanced thing I'd need to make, I needed a better workbench, until, sure enough, I had a fabrication workbench, but to get that, I had to have a forge, and to have a forge, I needed... you get the picture. This is where my 3 days of looting really came in clutch. I'd mined limestone I'd need for concrete powder, I'd collected almost every tool I found for iron scraps, which would be needed for ingots, I'd collected loads more power tools than I needed so that I could dismantle them for plastic, wires and iron, so I was at least equipped to get these things done. Without those days of looting, though, there'd have been no chance. The relentless crafting and grinding of levels meant that I had the materials and the skills required for a repair bench. This was mission critical. Now I could repair items and keep them going for virtually as long as I needed to. Eventually, I managed to grind my levels, craft enough things, and dismantle enough things to be able to get to another major milestone. On day 4, I managed to build a makeshift battery. Game changer. Now I could hook up my fridge, my microwave, the lights, well, not the lights as I didn't want to break the bulbs, but I had power. Wonderful electrical power. Look, even the TV works, which, if you haven't already, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed, like the video, and hype it too. Thank you so much. But with the electrical power, the reliance on wood or charcoal for a stove was gone. I could also store and keep food fresh for longer. It felt like we were in a really good place. Yes, I know what you're thinking, but a makeshift battery needs to be maintained with electrical scraps. Don't pee on my bonfire. I'll get to that at the end. It just felt like the base was really becoming self-sustainable. I'd also managed to extend the farm. I was fortunate enough to have 2 large planters already here, but I decided to expand the farm with more planters, partially to grind my survivalism skill, partially to increase the output, and growing crops really worked. Helped by some pretty gnarly rain at times, harvesting crops was a tremendous success as I, with an increasing survivalism skill, was able to reap food and seeds from each successful harvest. In addition to farming for food, I had brought so many fishing rods, lines, hooks, and so much fishing bait with me, I could have momentarily thought I was playing a completely different game. But no, this was still vain. Needless to say, I could catch fish with ease, and then I could either cook them, or I could butcher them to give me bones, great for bone meal, or fish guts, great for fishing bait. So much so that I didn't need to use the bait that I'd brought with me anymore. Fishing became a totally self-sustainable way of eating, in the same way that farming had done too. Going into day 6, I was in a really good spot, but there was one thing I hadn't yet sorted out. Water. Yes, I had over 1,000 litres of water in the water tank that was already hooked up, but again, we want to be self-sustainable, and in that vein, pun absolutely intended, I wanted to get some sort of water collection set up. I could have gone for a well, which was what the limestone I'd mined was originally intended for, but now I didn't have enough limestone due to my crafting exploits, so I opted for an insulated rain collector instead. This would enable water virtually all year round, provided I rationed it wisely. I dismantled yet more tools to make more iron scraps, to make more ingots, to make more scrap metal, to make the insulated rain collector. And boom, it was born. I had power, I had water, I had food, I had the means to get a virtually unlimited amount of food with farming and fishing. I had done it. Mission success, self-sustainability, yes it can be done, victory. Okay, let's talk about that rather large-sized elephant in the room. Maintenance. I'd done all of this, workbenches, a repair bench, a makeshift battery, solar, expanded farm, storage crates. I'd gotten enough scraps, materials and tools through the 3-day looting spree to make this happen, but, and a big but, eventually this would all run out. I'd eventually run out of the scraps needed to maintain the base, the water collector would break down, I'd have to drink out of the lake, I'd not be able to boil the water because the battery would break down, and the microwave would no longer work. I'd no longer be able to cook food because I'd have no power and no clean water, and this was all for nothing. Gutted. Defeated. Failure. But in reality, after all this work, after everything I'd done, all the things I'd crafted, all the things I'd built, all the skills I'd gained, all the hours and hours of real-life effort I'd put in, the reality was that I needed 5 things to make a self-sustainable base. A building with a bed, some pre-existing farm plots that didn't need maintaining, some watermelon seeds, a shovel for soil, and a bucket to water my crops. That's all you need for a self-sustainable base in vain. Until the rebalance comes, that is. Thanks so much for watching. Please do like, subscribe, and hype this video. I'll catch you on Monday for my Let's Play, and on Wednesday for another Vane video.